Tonight, Arctic blast, parts of the country slammed with heavy snow and extreme cold. Whiteout conditions in several states. In Pennsylvania, this semi-truck going off a highway and into the woods. Firefighters in Minnesota battling flames and wind chills 35 degrees below zero. Sub-zero temps also felt across the Northeast. Schools and COVID testing sites forced to close, and the new storm on the way. Also breaking tonight, the chopper crash miracle. The new images tonight after a medical helicopter crash landed in front of a Philadelphia church. An infant and 3 other medical personnel on board, all of them surviving. What the pilot did that saved all those lives. Tense moments on Capitol Hill. The heated exchange between Dr. Fauci and Senator Rand Paul. Fauci accusing the Republican senator of using the virus for political and financial gain. Fauci coming under fire for the country's testing breakdown. This as the U.S. records more than 1 million new infections in a single day. Some hospitals forced to ask staff to come into work even though they have COVID. Plus the new data showing Omicron may be on the way out. They're being called takeover robberies. The new surveillance video showing thieves armed with hammers forcing customers to the ground before making off with tens of thousands of dollars in jewelry. And police say this highly coordinated attack is part of an alarming trend. Firefight, out-of-control flames engulfing an entire neighborhood in Chile. Firefighters struggling to access water to put it out. And the warning tonight that your tax refund may be delayed. Stephanie Rule is here to break down why. Top story starts right now. Hey, good evening. I'm Tom Llamas. We begin Top Story tonight with that bitter cold. An Arctic blast bringing heavy snow and sub-zero temperatures to a large portion of the country. Over 2 feet of snow dumped across the Great Lakes. You can see right here whiteout conditions leading to multiple crashes and stranded vehicles. In Pennsylvania, a burst of snow also sending trucks off the road, one hitting an embankment and landing on its side. The coldest air in 3 years felt in the Northeast. Several school districts closed today, including Boston, where, get this, wind chills are expected to be 15 to 20 degrees below zero. And look at this, a fountain in New York City's Bryant Park frozen over with feels-like temperatures there in the single digits. Some relief from this deep freeze is on the way. We'll have a forecast in just a few moments. But first, our Dasha Burns again leads us off tonight.
Tonight, millions reeling from severe deep freeze, temperatures below zero, and heavy snowfall. Whiteout blizzard conditions wreaking havoc on roadways and rescue efforts from the Great Lakes to the Northeast. In Minnesota, Duluth fire crews battling a raging blaze for several hours in negative 35-degree wind chills.
I think the actual temperature was around 18 below or so when the call came in. It's dangerous for us, just like anybody else being outside.
Overnight, blinding snow squalls creating hazardous driving conditions. This truck in Allenwood, Pennsylvania, hitting an embankment, rolling over after sliding across a roadway. And in Girard Township, a semi-truck losing control on a major interstate, jackknifing into nearby woods. Across New England, wind chills expected to plummet as low as 15 degrees below zero.
It's just really stinging, uncomfortable, painful cold if you're out in it.
With temps in the dangerously low digits, hospitals already inundated due to Omicron are now dealing with the dual effects of both COVID and the cold weather.
There's a lot of sick patients, and I think the addition of the cold weather puts a little bit of a wrinkle in. There are patients who can't necessarily go home, or they're in a shelter, and we have to be careful. Someone with COVID can't go back there.
How quickly can frostbite set in when you're dealing with the kind of wind chills that you're seeing in parts of the country right now?
Sure. You're probably talking about 30 minutes or so. The wind really whips up, or it's below zero and sub-zero temperatures. It could be 15 minutes, 10 minutes.
The Arctic blast also forcing many outdoor COVID testing sites across the region to close. Boston closing schools due to the bitter cold for the first time in 7 years.
We want to make sure there's no risk of students being either out in the cold on the way to school or having issues in school because of the ventilation that's needed.
All right, Dasha Burns joins us now. And Dasha, we heard there from the chair of emergency medicine at one of the city's largest hospital systems. You spoke with him about precautions people can take when temperatures get this low. Yeah. What did he recommend?
Yeah, look, Tom, one of the biggest hazards, frostbite, right? For that, you really want to keep an eye on your extremities, your toes, your fingers, your ears, your nose. Make sure you're covering up with gloves, that hat, and covering your face as well. You know, we all have plenty of face masks at home at this point. The other concern is hypothermia. And Tom, unlike frostbite, which can set in really quickly, hypothermia actually takes a while to set in. So what's scary about that is people may not know that they're becoming hypothermic. The people who are especially vulnerable to that are the elderly, children, and folks who may be intoxicated and not realizing what's happening to their body. So if you're out in temperatures like this, be extremely careful, be aware, and bundle up, Tom.
Yeah, it is an incredibly dangerous situation right now. All right, Dasha Burns leading us off. Dasha, thank you. Slightly warmer temperatures are moving in for the next few days. For that, let's go to NBC News meteorologist Bill Cairns, who joins Top Story for the first time tonight. So, Bill, today was the coldest day in 3 years in New England. How much longer will that last?
It's still a dangerous night tonight. We have dropped all of our wind chill warnings, and that means that the winds have died down. But it's still cold. I mean, where Dasha was standing outside, it's 12 degrees. Look at northern portions of Maine, Caribou, it's -10. That's the temperature with really no breeze out there at all. So there's still some very cold stuff out there. But tomorrow when the sun comes out, it's going to feel much better. Temperatures jump into the 30s and even the 20s in areas that today didn't even get above freezing. So improvement is coming, and especially towards the beginning of the holiday weekend.
All right, Bill, we've been talking a lot about the Northeast and the Mid-Atlantic over the last couple of days, but I know there's a lot happening with the Pacific Northwest as well.
Yeah, get ready for this next storm, and this one's going to go all the way across the country. But our friends in the Pacific Northwest, they rained 4 inches in the first week of January in Seattle. Now we're getting the mountains, just an epic rainfall event. We call these atmospheric rivers, and it's just a big plume of moisture coming off the Pacific. Some of these mountainous areas, the Olympics, the Northern Cascades, all under flash flood watches. They're expecting upwards of 10 inches in the Olympics and the possibility of 6 inches in the Cascades. We have to watch out for river flooding in the days ahead in this region.
And, Bill, finally, I know there's a big winter storm we're watching over the weekend.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of buzz building because the storm that's going to hit Seattle is eventually going to travel through southern Canada, and then it's going to head into the central U.S. And over the next 7 days, it's going to track all the way from the northern plains down along the Gulf Coast and eventually come up the eastern seaboard. That would be Sunday into Monday. And this storm could produce a significant amount of snow to the north of this storm track and in the central plains, in the central portion of it. Let me show you the latest from our European computer model. This is kind of known as being the most accurate, and it does show snow Friday in the central plains, Saturday just a little bit maybe in the deep south, and then the storm could become a nor'easter going right up the east coast. It's too early to pinpoint how badly what cities are going to get, but we have the potential for a significant winter storm. Some areas will get a lot of snow from this, and of course that's over the holiday weekend, Sunday and then Monday on Martin Luther King Day. So, don't change your plans yet, but pay attention to this forecast. This could easily be the biggest snowstorm of this winter.
All right, we'll stay tracking this throughout the weekend. Bill, great to have you on Top Story tonight. We're also following a developing story out of Philadelphia. A medical helicopter carrying an infant and 3 other people crashing in front of a church. Everyone inside making it out alive. Gabe Gutierrez is there with the latest.
That's a helicopter.
It may be hard to believe, but tonight everyone, including an infant who was in this mangled medical helicopter, is alive. And incredibly, no one on the ground was hurt.
I literally see the chopper in the sky, like right there. And so I'm stopped. But then there was a moment where I realized this is going to hit the ground. So that's when I pulled in reverse.
This man was driving his family in a neighborhood just west of Philadelphia this afternoon and barely dodged a catastrophe.
This is absolutely a miracle from the Lord.
A miraculous landing, witnesses say, right next to a church.
It's an absolute miracle here, what you see behind you, how this, and there's no debris, no wires down, no trees.
The chopper had been flying to a children's hospital in Philly, carrying 2 crew members, a nurse, and the infant. All 4 of them were able to escape the wreckage, even before emergency crews arrived.
Everyone's out of the helicopter.
No word yet on what caused the crash. The NTSB will investigate.
It was absolutely insane. I've never seen anything like this.
But tonight, authorities here are crediting the pilot.
This was a miraculous landing.
And perhaps a higher power for a remarkable landing against all odds.
A remarkable landing is right. Gabe joins us now from Drexel Hill, Pennsylvania, right where the crash happened. You can actually see the helicopter there just behind him. So, Gabe, what do we know about this pilot, and how was he able to maneuver that chopper to avoid any casualties?
Tom, it really is incredible. If I step out of the way, you can see just how close we are to this helicopter. Authorities say that the pilot ran into trouble about a mile from here in the air and then had to fly low to the ground before eventually landing this chopper right there. And what really strikes you here on the ground is just how close that chopper came to that church, and incredibly, no one was killed, Tom.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez on that breaking news tonight for us. Gabe, thank you. Turning now to Capitol Hill, where some of the nation's top health officials were grilled on the pandemic response. The hearing full of tense exchanges. Dr. Fauci accusing one Republican senator of making false accusations that, quote, kindle the crazies and lead to threats against Fauci and his family. This as the U.S. reports 1.3 million infections in just one day. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer reports.
On the very day COVID cases tallied a staggering record high, 1.3 million new infections reported in 24 hours, key members of the White House COVID task force were blasted over their handling of the pandemic.
And I'm not questioning the science, but I'm questioning your communication strategies. No wonder that the American people are confused.
Testifying on Capitol Hill as new hospitalizations soar, up 83%, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Walensky faced withering criticism over perceived missteps and miscommunication.
The American people don't trust the words coming out of your mouth. Every day you appear on TV, you do more damage than good.
A frustrated Fauci caught off camera on a hot mic after a series of heated exchanges.
What a moron. Jesus Christ.
As the Biden administration pushes for more testing amid a serious lack of supplies and overwhelming demand,
tests are hard to find, they're costly.
Frustrated lawmakers also called out the CDC's evolving guidance over shortened isolation times for those who contract COVID, as pressure mounted from big business short on staff.
You are scientists, not politicians. Nevertheless, you are being made subject to the political whims of various political individuals, and that comes at a high cost.
Today's 4-hour hearing, at times personal.
What happens when he gets out and accuses me of things that are completely untrue is that all of a sudden that kindles the crazies out there, and I have life that threats upon my life.
So for you to somehow suggest that somehow I or people who dare to oppose you are responsible for threats, that's insulting.
The contention reflective of our national divide.
And the purpose of the committee was to try and get things out, how we can help.
As our nation braces for what could still be the worst of the spike in the days ahead, there was also this sobering warning as hospitals today struggle to manage the current surge.
I think it's hard to process what's actually happening right now, which is most people are going to get COVID.
All right, Miguel Almaguer joins us now. And Miguel, I know you have a bit of international news. The World Health Organization now weighing in on the effectiveness of the vaccines against variants like Omicron.
Yeah, that's right, Tom. Advisors to the WHO say the current vaccines that are offered around the world are fairly ineffective against Omicron. They believe there needs to be a new vaccine that needs to better address variants that will circulate in the coming future. But of course, advisors and production people, folks here in the U.S. say it's still too early to determine that.
All right, Miguel Almaguer with all those headlines on COVID tonight. Miguel, thank you. And another controversial COVID policy coming under fire. Some hospitals now taking a drastic step, allowing nurses and doctors who have COVID to come into work if they are asymptomatic. Officials saying the move is needed due to staffing shortages. But tonight, many are outraged. One veteran ER tech calling the move, quote, a slap in the face. So what could all of this mean for their patients? Our Priscilla Thompson has more.
Across the country, hospitals battling staffing shortages now taking an astonishing step, asking healthcare workers with COVID to return to work.
What went through your mind when you heard that news?
This seemed like a slap in the face.
California emergency room technician Gabriel Montoya says he was disgusted when over the weekend the state announced that through February 1st, staff who test positive and are asymptomatic may return to work immediately without isolation and without testing. Those staff must wear N95 masks.
If you're relying on the science, then you shouldn't be putting people's health at risk based on staffing issues.
The move comes as the nation's hospitals are facing a double whammy. Daily case counts and the hospitalization rate hitting record highs, while hospital workers out with COVID are creating severe staffing shortages. The combination prompting the CDC to update return to work guidelines for healthcare workers.
It's very callous, and it's putting our patients and ourselves in grave danger.
The president of the California Nurses Association says this isn't the answer.
Our patients are in the hospital because they're sick. And for someone to go in there who is positive for the virus, it's a major disaster waiting to happen.
Experts, however, say the change isn't unheard of outside of the U.S.
This is about cohorting, right? This is about having people who are already infected, taking care of infected people. We did this for Ebola in West Africa. It's not one of the first things you'd put in the playbook, but it is in the playbook, and it's towards the end.
California isn't alone. Hospitals in Hawaii, Arizona, Maine, and Rhode Island also changing their policies. One hospital in Rhode Island even confirming an instance of a positive asymptomatic staffer working with patients who didn't have the virus. The hospital posting on their website the move was made due to staffing constraints and that it hasn't led to a COVID outbreak at the facility. Now, a nursing home in the state bringing back positive staff too.
No one could have anticipated the depth of the staffing challenge that we find ourselves in right now. And this latest surge of Omicron is like nothing we've seen.
An unprecedented move for an unprecedented moment.
So true. Priscilla Thompson joins us now here in studio. And Priscilla, I think there's only one question tonight on this, and a lot of people at home are going to be asking this. Will these infected doctors and nurses that are allowed to work while sick with COVID, will they be able to treat patients? We know they will be treating patients, but could they possibly get those patients sick?
Well, doctors tell me that if those healthcare workers have on that N95 mask, they have on an additional mask and a face shield, those patients should be protected. However, there is debate around whether a patient should be informed if that healthcare worker that is working with them is positive for COVID. If a family member has a loved one in a nursing home, should they be allowed to know if the people working with them have COVID? And there are also some questions about the impact of healthcare workers being in a break room if they have COVID and they're drinking coffee, eating food without those masks on, and what that could mean for their colleagues.
It creates all types of issues, but it also speaks to the staffing shortages we're seeing at these hospitals. All right, Priscilla, really great story. Thanks so much for joining us tonight. As hospital systems all over the country are overwhelmed with a spike in COVID patients, we want to bring in NBC News medical contributor Dr. Kavita Patel to help us understand this new approach. So, Dr. Patel, I wanted to have you on tonight because people are going to be watching this story and hearing these headlines, and they're going to be really confused. So you just heard Priscilla's report there. Some states are allowing healthcare workers who test positive but are asymptomatic to continue to work. What's your take on this?
Yeah, Tom, honestly, it's a difficult situation that we've been put in because ideally you don't want anyone, even if they're asymptomatic, to feel compelled to come back to work, a place where even with all their precautions, you can't guarantee that they don't infect someone else. And we know with Omicron, you can be asymptomatic one day, Tom, test positive, and then be symptomatic the next. So I think that what's unfortunate is the truth. We are reaching hospital capacity across the country. We're exceeding hospital capacity in parts of the country, and we are down in some places, in my clinic, anywhere from a third to 40% of staff because of isolation and quarantines. So this has become an unfortunate necessity. I hope that just telling people that the staff you have might be somebody who tested positive yesterday gives people today listening and watching pause and makes them reconsider their weekend plans. Maybe makes them put a mask back on just to think about it.
Right. You know, we heard from that one ER technician who was saying this is essentially a slap in the face. But I also wonder about all the healthcare professionals that didn't get their vaccine, who are not being allowed to work because of the rules and the mandates. And now there are people who did get the vaccine who are sick but are allowed to work. Isn't that incredibly confusing to people?
It is. I mean, if there is good news to be had in any of this, Tom, it's that percentage of healthcare workers that are not getting their vaccines is shrinking. It's not zero, but in many places, Mayo Clinic publicized their data. It's only been 1% of their staff. But that 1% is hundreds of people, to your point, that are home. And I'm coming to work and I'm doing what I can, to your point. So it's a slap in the face. It's creating divide, by the way, real world. It's creating a divide amongst our staff. And it's also creating resentment. What we don't want as a patient is to walk into a situation we're already vulnerable. I don't want to be greeted by a medical team that is burnt out and tired and now resentful that they had to come to work when everybody else, including my patients, I'm telling them, stay put, sit, take care of yourself. And you can see where a lot of these emotions turn into a really ugly reality.
Yeah, they're essentially the hospital administrators just have two bad choices right now because it's so bad with these staffing shortages. I want to talk about masks. We did this yesterday on Top Story. It's been getting a lot of buzz, basically about the different masks that we wear. And again, about this sort of confusing people. For a year now, we've been wearing, almost 2 years, these cloth masks. We're now being told to wear those upgraded masks. Is there a big difference? And is this all, I mean, I know there's a big difference, but is this all because of Omicron?
Yeah, a large part of it. We've always known that better masks are just, higher quality masks are just better, period, Tom. It's why I think, but you know what? I even had those fabric masks on weekends because I thought I'm vaccinated, I'm boosted, I can a little bit lay off the precautions. Omicron has changed the game. 6 feet, 15 minutes, none of those rules apply. What can protect you is a high quality mask. And remember, Tom, it's best when everyone around you is masked as well. One in a sea of maskless faces does not protect.
All right, Dr. Patel for us tonight. Thank you so much for walking us through that because I know there's a lot to handle there. We do appreciate your time. We want to turn now to politics tonight. President Biden and Vice President Harris delivering a major speech in Georgia on voting rights. Biden expressing frustration on how voting rights bills have been stalled in Congress and calling to eliminate the filibuster if Republicans continue to block this kind of legislation. Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has more.
President Biden tonight casting this new voting rights push as a critical turning point for America.
Will we choose democracy over autocracy, light over shadows, justice over injustice? I know where I stand.
Framing today's effort through the lens of the civil rights movement, the president in Atlanta first visiting Martin Luther King Jr.'s grave, as well as the church where he preached. Asked if he has the votes to pass the bills.
Keep the faith. I ask every elected official in America, how do you want to be remembered? You want to be on the side of Dr. King or George Wallace?
Despite threats of Republican retaliation, President Biden tonight endorsed a major change to long-standing Senate rules that would end the 60-vote requirement to avoid a filibuster, specifically on voting rights so that Democrats can approve that legislation alone with just 50 votes.
I support changing the Senate rules, whichever way they need to be changed to prevent a minority of senators from blocking action on voting rights.
It's a reversal for the president, who, as a senator, spent decades defending the filibuster.
At its core, the filibuster is not about stopping a nominee or a bill. It's about compromise and moderation.
But moderate Democrat Joe Manchin earlier reiterated his opposition to changing those Senate rules, which would sink the Democrats' effort.
We need some good rule changes to make the place work better, but getting rid of the filibuster doesn't make it work better.
Notably absent today, top Georgia Democrat Stacey Abrams citing a scheduling conflict. The Democratic legislation includes requiring all states to allow mail-in voting, making Election Day a national holiday, and loosening state voter ID requirements. Republicans accuse Democrats of orchestrating fake hysteria.
There is no widespread effort to suppress minority voting rights in America. It's non-existent. It doesn't exist, and this has nothing to do with this. This has to do with power.
The president gambling on a new campaign for voting rights legislation without the votes right now to make it happen.
All right, Peter joins us now from the White House. Peter, I have two questions to you, and the first leads into the second. I want to go back to something you mentioned in your report. The most prominent voting rights activist in the state of Georgia, Stacey Abrams, did not attend this speech. We know she's running for governor. She's also one of the most prominent Democrats. What exactly was the reason she wasn't there? Because we know some voting rights groups actually boycotted the speech.
Yeah, no, Tom, you're exactly right. And this was striking that she would be absent there. The White House and Abrams say there was a scheduling conflict. The president, before he left today, said that he spoke to Abrams and they just got their schedules confused here. But it was significant because of her high-profile position as it relates to voting rights and new protections, particularly among Democratic voters right now. As you noted, there were several civil rights and voting rights groups in Georgia who said they weren't going to show up today, and they didn't, saying that they've seen enough inaction to this point. They need to see the president do something concrete. Tom?
Yeah, and on that point, on the action part, the president may be facing a key test on this in just 24 hours?
Yeah, that's right. The Senate's top Democrat, Chuck Schumer, says that he'll call a vote on this consequential issue on voting rights as soon as tomorrow. But for the president, despite that passionate plea today, the math really does not appear to be on his side at this point. The two Democrats, Manchin and Sinema, they have made their position opposing changes to the filibuster clear. The president's speech, designed in part to reassure increasingly frustrated supporters, did not lay out any concrete actions to get this issue over the finish line. Tom?
All right, Peter Alexander for us from the White House. Peter, thank you. We want to turn overseas tonight. A serious new threat emerging out of North Korea. The country completing its most advanced missile test to date, and its second in a week. Chief Foreign Affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell reports on how the U.S. is responding.
Kim Jong-un's latest missile launch, a new hypersonic ballistic missile, according to South Korea. Traveling at Mach 10, 10 times the speed of sound, landing in the Sea of Japan. Experts alarmed by its speed and its ability to evade missile defenses because its warhead re-enters the atmosphere on a detachable glide vehicle that swerves back and forth mid-flight before reaching its target.
Once one of those missiles takes off, it's not always clear just exactly what direction that missile is going to take. The direction of that missile could very well be directed at the West Coast or directed at some of our other assets in the Pacific.
This after Kim's New Year's pledge to keep advancing his nuclear program.
How close are they, do you think, to perfecting this new missile?
They are further along than we ever expected in terms of this ballistic missile capability.
Minutes after the launch, the FAA grounded all flights up and down the West Coast for 5 to 7 minutes as a precaution.
What's the ground set for?
We don't know. We are trying to find out.
Tonight, the U.S. denounced the test for violating UN resolutions and said Kim has not responded to President Biden's offers to negotiate limits on his nuclear weapons. Tom?
Andrea, thank you. Now to a warning from the Treasury Department about tax season. You may still be waiting for your W-2s, but the agency is now saying that an understaffed, underfunded IRS could lead to delays in processing tax refunds. NBC News senior business correspondent Stephanie Rule has more on what's happening and what taxpayers need to know right now.
Assistant school teacher Lauren Tracy filed her taxes online for the first time last year.
We got everything squared away. It wasn't that complicated.
But then she realized because she had been furloughed from a previous job, she was due a bigger refund.
I filed $1,050 through my amended tax return and on paper, and I've heard nothing about it. Everything is showing as received.
9 months later, Lauren is still waiting for that refund.
There are over 6 million individual returns that have not been processed.
And that's from last year.
Correct.
And this year, Treasury Department officials have a warning for taxpayers. Prepare to be frustrated. Due to the pandemic, the IRS is entering tax season with a significant backlog, and the department is facing staffing shortages. Last year, fewer than 15,000 workers had to handle 240 million calls. The IRS's workforce is the same size as it was in 1970, with a budget nearly 20% less than 10 years ago. And COVID has only increased challenges in the agency, especially for paper returns.
IRS employees have to be in the building to process their paper returns. COVID, with the social distancing, restricting the employees in the building, it limits how many employees can work at one time.
To avoid delays in getting your refund, experts advise file online, triple check for errors, and choose direct deposit. And if you have to file a paper return,
the IRS will work first in, first out. So the sooner you can get your return in, the sooner you are in the beginning of the process.
And if you do end up waiting for a refund, at least you'll collect some interest. The good news, the IRS usually processes 80 to 90% of returns without a problem. And if you're due a refund, you'll likely get it within 21 days. The bad news, if there's a problem, if there's an issue, you'll be waiting. Most years it's weeks. This year it could be months.
All right, Steph, thank you for that. Still ahead tonight, high school football players arrested. The teenagers now facing several charges in connection to a series of alleged hazing incidents that were recorded. Plus, the new surveillance video showing thieves armed with hammers smashing through a jewelry store and robbing them while customers were inside. But police say the store was not the only target. And 3 small children pulled from an icy pond. The woman now credited with saving their lives. Stay with us. Top story. Just getting started on this Tuesday night. Back now with the violent robbery caught on camera. Thieves smashing their way into a San Jose jewelry store with hammers, making off with tens of thousands of dollars in stolen jewels. It's the latest in a string of smash and grab robberies that are growing more and more violent. Police calling them takeover robberies. Gotti Schwartz has the latest tonight from Los Angeles.
Tonight, new surveillance video showing a violent and highly coordinated robbery. 10 men storming 3 jewelry stores in a Northern California shopping center. Police say this is an escalation of the smash and grab robberies that have been plaguing the area. The criminals armed with hammers, forcing customers to the ground, ordering staff members to hand over valuables under threat.
A takeover robbery is very different from a standard smash and grab or what we've seen recently with retail mall thefts. These individuals actually forced their way into the store, and by saying takeover robbery, they demanded everybody to get on the ground. They forced people who were present, including staff members, to do their will.
Investigators say the group of 10 stole more than $110,000 in valuables from the San Jose shopping center last week as employees ran for cover. Police say the group is still at large. The California Attorney General sounding the alarm after this troubling trend continues to spiral out of control.
The coordinated criminal activity we've seen in retail stores and online through the resale of stolen goods is not shoplifting or petty crime. It is organized. It is serious crime. And it's going to take an organized and a serious strategy to put a stop to it.
Local reports say police officers and security guards have increased patrols at most shopping centers in the San Francisco Bay Area, but crime continues to surge. While the surge of these crimes grab headlines, police say robberies are down, though critics blame the state for what they call a soft-on-crime approach to sentencing criminals that may entice them to commit these acts.
I think the problems with these cases are more evidentiary than laws that are soft on crime. It's just really hard to convict people or to even charge people of crimes when all you have is a video with a bunch of masked people smashing counters. Those are tough cases, and the investigators have to have time to build them backwards and build those cases.
All right, Gotti Schwartz joins us now from Los Angeles. So, Gotti, tell us a little bit more about these crime stats. We've done a lot of these stories here on Top Story, especially in the Bay Area. We're talking about San Jose tonight. You said robberies decreased, but we're seeing this rise in organized thefts, which those are the videos we've been seeing of these kind of mass groups coming in and stealing all types of things.
Yeah, Tom, there seems to be somewhat of a disconnect between what police are reporting and what's being seen in the headlines. According to the San Francisco Police Department, in December, larceny theft was up about 37% compared to last year, but what they classify as robberies were down by about 25%. Then in November, larceny theft was up by about 62% compared to last year, but robberies were down by 14%. Now, obviously, the ones that we're seeing recently, they are extremely public, and some experts are saying they almost fall into a category in themselves, and they're calling them mobberies because so many people are involved. But again, we still have yet to see any reporting on where things stand this year.
Yeah, mobberies, that's a new phrase we're learning. So, I understand what the former U.S. attorney you spoke to was trying to say there. She was saying it wasn't a soft on crime approach. It's hard to catch these people. But isn't that what police work and prosecution is all about?
Yeah, and this is what it's going to come down to. Good old-fashioned police work, setting up tip lines, reviewing a lot of video, requesting phone records when they have probable cause. Officials say that eventually they think that they're going to be able to solve these cases because the more people involved, the more likely it is that somebody's eventually going to talk. And as you can see from those videos, there are quite a few people involved. Tom?
All right, Gotti Schwartz for us tonight. Gotti, always great to have you on this show. Thank you. When we come back, the looming crisis for schools, a growing number of teachers hit with COVID and calling out sick, the shortages coming as districts already struggle to fill jobs, and payday loans. Many use them to get out of a pinch, but then find themselves in a revolving door of debt. What to know before going to them for help? Vicki Wynn is here in the house. Stay with us. Back now with Top Story's news feed. Members of a New Jersey high school football team are now facing criminal charges over hazing allegations. The teens facing several charges, including criminal sexual contact and false imprisonment. The series of alleged incidents, some of which were captured on cell phone video, taking place in the team's locker room in the fall. At least 4 students suspended. The school's athletic director and multiple coaches have been placed now on leave. The Department of Justice is forming a unit to combat domestic terrorism. The unit announced announced as the Senate Judiciary Committee holds a hearing on domestic terror threats in the wake of the January 6th insurrection. During that hearing, it was revealed the number of FBI investigations into domestic violent extremism has more than doubled since the spring of 2020. And the Colorado woman credited with saving the lives of 3 children. Body cam footage shows officers racing to the side of an unresponsive 6-year-old girl after she was pulled from an icy pond. Police say a 23-year-old neighbor saw 3 children fall in from her window and jumped right into action, that woman falling into the pond herself. When a family member threw a rope in, she was able to get all 3 children to safety. She is a hero. All right, we want to turn now to Money Talks, what consumers and investors need to know from the business world and beyond. A growing issue in small and big cities across America: payday lenders. They offer a quick cash fix, but new questions are being asked. How often do they trap people in a cycle of debt? Here's senior consumer investigative reporter Vicki Nguyen with what you need to know before taking out that loan.
Jennifer Williams, a Mississippi mother, was having trouble covering her expenses on a school teacher's salary. So she turned to a so-called payday lender.
I started with $200, and then when it was time for me to rewrite, I increased it to $400, and that was the start of my payday lender journey.
That one loan turned into how many loans?
At the end, I had a total of 9.
Payday lenders provide customers like Williams with short-term, small-dollar loans. But unlike traditional banks, they don't require credit checks or consider whether a borrower can reasonably repay loans. The catch: shockingly high interest rates, often as much as 400%.
It caused me so much stress, so many headaches, nights of crying, trying to figure out how I'm going to get to the next pay period.
You called it quicksand. How would you characterize that cycle?
I put it like a habit. You need it.
That quicksand is trapping a lot of borrowers. One study found that 76% of payday loans are used to pay off previous ones. A revolving door of debt with increasing interest. While lenders say they're providing a necessary service to help people with these small loans, many consumer advocates call the industry predatory.
They are designed to be a debt trap.
Lauren Saunders is the associate director of the National Consumer Law Center in Washington, D.C.
How do these types of loans perpetuate a cycle of poverty? They perpetuate the harm we've seen in communities of color who have been deprived of income and assets.
In Mississippi, where Williams lives, there are more payday lenders than McDonald's, Burger King's, and Starbucks combined, according to state estimates. And a new study concludes the industry overwhelmingly targets Black and Latino communities in advertisements. Some states are taking steps to help. So far, just under 20 states and Washington, D.C. have passed laws restricting interest rates that lenders can charge on payday loans. This summer, Hawaii capped rates and fees at 36%. And while broader federal legislation has stalled, Darren Williams, CEO of Southern Bancorp, an Arkansas-based lender, says institutions like his are already helping consumers.
People need access to small dollar lending. There's a more responsible and responsive way to do that.
His bank runs a learning center that offers financial classes, free tax prep, and low interest loans.
Low wealth people also want to build wealth. And so if we can help you save and start accumulating wealth and pass down for generations, then we can help break this cycle.
Jennifer Williams says Southern Bancorp's program worked for her. What were the lessons you took away?
We went through topics as small as bringing your lunch to save money instead of going out and then buying a meal every day, or grabbing water instead of buying that soda, creating a monthly budget. We had a plan to address our financial situations and a new start on life, honestly.
Experts say if you need help, check online for available financial literacy classes. Many are now offered on Zoom. Ask your credit card or utility company for a repayment plan and save any windfalls like your annual tax refund for an emergency fund.
They prey on the vulnerable or the weak.
For Jennifer, who took out her first payday loan in 2008, it took about 8 years to get out of debt. How did it feel when you paid off all of those loans?
I can't even describe it. I got my life back.
So many lenders out there. So it's a buyer beware. Really know the terms, the interest before you take out one of these payday loans. 2 tips from financial experts. 1, don't be ashamed if you have debt, and consider turning to a friend or a family member before a payday loan. So many borrowers say that's what they wish they had done. And number 2, seek out a credit counselor. They are a fountain of knowledge. So much great advice for how to form a budget and also help you get out of debt. Tom?
So Vicki, you watch this and you wonder, can anything more be done? Has this gotten on the radar of state or federal lawmakers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So back in 2019, federal lawmakers introduced a bill. This would have capped interest rates for consumers at 36% across the nation. But that bill, even with bipartisan support, has stalled. So now, as you see, states are taking it into their own hands.
All right, Vicki Wynn for us tonight on Top Story. Vicki, we thank you for that. Now to the teacher shortage, putting a strain on the U.S. education system. As COVID cases surge around the country, many teachers are calling out sick and there just aren't enough subs to fill in. Educators and experts are sounding the alarm now. NBC News correspondent Zincle Esamwa has the latest.
Tonight, as Omicron surges on, teachers are calling out with COVID, leading to a potential crisis across the nation's schools.
We would like our students to test negative.
In Chicago, in-person classes resume Wednesday. The teachers union reaching a deal with the city after a heated standoff.
Nearly everyone and every student and every staff member in the building had an interaction with someone who had COVID.
The pandemic amplifying a teaching shortage that was already brewing. Nationally, the ratio of educator hires to job openings is on the decline. In June 2021, the ratio was 0.65 hires for every open position. By September 2021, just 0.38. Today, this shortage fueled further by the raging pandemic.
We are underestimating how difficult the job is right now.
Kate Diaz is currently a substitute teacher and president of the Connecticut Education Association.
We're exhausted. I have teachers telling me, I'm barely having time to, go to the bathroom, let alone actually do some work.
The tension palpable, extending through the educator pipeline.
I have personally been involved with several of our superintendents who have actually been contemplating suicide. They've had to deal with the controversies over whether schools should open or not open. And most recently, this thing with critical race theory.
Dan Domenech says superintendents typically managing teachers now find themselves back in the classroom. In Boston, Superintendent Brenda Casalias says she taught an elementary school class in early January because of teacher absences.
Said, I'll clear my calendar and I'll go over and teach a 4th grade class.
In West Contra Costa, California, school was canceled Monday and school office staff were deployed to cover staffing shortages. The superintendent, Chris Hurst, even substitute teaching at an elementary school. But this teaching shortage is not just bringing educators to the classroom. St. Louis Cardinals player Harrison Bader was even tapped to substitute teach in a St. Louis elementary school.
If there are any substitute teacher openings, let me know.
Still, amid the lighter moments, a grim reality.
As long as we don't have the high level of vaccination on our population, it's going to continue.
What is the impact on students? You really have a transient teacher population covering. Those kids don't have the same experience. They don't develop a relationship. There's not a consistency, a normalcy to that class.
All right, Zincle joins us now live. So Zincle, look, this is a problem we know that's happening all across the country. You spoke with some current teachers. What are they asking of their school districts?
Yeah, so teachers simply are asking for safety protection. Specifically, Kate Diaz, who we just heard from, a substitute teacher in Connecticut. She's saying they want more PPE, they want more masks. Her organization is actually staging what they're calling a blackout on Wednesday. They're saying they will attend, they will teach, but they're going to wear black in solidarity with teachers around the country asking for more worker support. Tom?
Yeah, and they definitely do need support right now. All right, Zincle, we thank you for that. Coming up, the immigration fight going to the Supreme Court. The justice is now deciding how long someone can stay in detention while they fight deportation, how the court is expected to rule. Pete Williams is coming up. Plus, the neighborhood inferno in Chile. Have you seen these images? Why firefighters struggle to put out those raging flames. Stay with us. All right, back now with the Americas, a look at stories coming out of the U.S. and across Latin America. The Supreme Court tonight considering just how long someone accused of entering this country illegally can be held in detention without a hearing. Right now, some are held for months, even years, as they fight deportation. NBC's justice correspondent Pete Williams has more.
At any given time, something like 25,000 people are detained by U.S. immigration authorities, many accused of entering the country illegally and subject to being deported. But because of a huge backlog, many of them wait for months, some even years, before they get a hearing to contest their detention by claiming that they'd be in danger if sent back to their home countries. And immigrant rights groups say for many of them, getting a lawyer is next to impossible.
The likelihood that somebody who is detained in an immigration prison can get an attorney is low. This is especially true because in the last several years, there have been several immigration prisons that have opened up throughout the country in very remote and rural areas in which it's a legal aid desert.
So some of the detainees sued, saying the government doesn't have the legal right to make them wait that long. They say they're entitled to a hearing after they've been held for 6 months. The Trump administration fought them in the lower courts, arguing there's no such deadline, and today the Biden administration took that same view, telling the Supreme Court that neither federal law nor the Constitution impose any such obligation on the government. But several of the court's liberals found that hard to accept.
Everybody gets bail hearings that you're going to detain for a significant amount of time. Every criminal case. Debtors used to in debtor prisons. Mental people being confined in hospitals have the equivalent. Extradition people get the hearings. Well, I looked at every case we could find. I didn't find any that said you don't get eventually a bail hearing when you're detained for a reasonably long length of time.
Lawyers for the detainees told the court they must be given more prompt hearings unless the government expects to deport them reasonably soon. Some of the court's conservatives found that very open-ended.
I think there could be chaos unless we say something more specific.
All right, Pete joins us now from Washington. So, Pete, given how the judges responded to the arguments presented to them this morning, as we heard in your report, do we have a sense of how the court might rule?
Yeah, I think this is going to be a tough one for the immigration lawyers. This newly conservative court has been much tougher lately on immigration rights, ruling against them in 3 recent cases, for example, on the Remain in Mexico policy, on what counts as a deportable offense, and on the reach of the programs that allow foreign nationals to stay in the U.S. temporarily when their home countries face disasters or wars. And it did appear today that the court will likely continue that trend, Tom.
All right, Pete Williams for us tonight. Pete, thank you. Now to top stories, Global Watch. I want to stay in the Americas now with a devastating fire in Chile. Video shows the raging fire tearing through parts of a poor neighborhood in Iquique. More than 100 homes destroyed and hundreds displaced. Firefighters struggling to fight the flames due to a lack of water in the area. So far, no reports of serious deaths or injuries. An alarming prediction from the World Health Organization as Omicron cases sweep the globe. Health officials say new data projects half of Europe will have been infected with the variant within 6 to 8 weeks. It comes after 7 million new cases were reported across the continent in the first week of 2022. And the wild scene in southwestern China. Take a look. New video shows at least 80 ostriches running through a city. Officials say the birds escaped from a farm after a gate was not properly closed. They're going fast there. The owner did manage to recapture most of the ostriches with the help of police. All right, when we come back, serving up a dream, the squash player we met on the court. Her incredible story, she started as an undocumented child in California. Now she's an investment banker on Wall Street. How squash helped her. Her will, her story, all coming up right after this. All right, finally tonight, the story of a young Mexican-American woman and the program that taught her to dream big. How the racket sport of squash allowed her and now thousands of students to succeed both on and off the court.
At 4'11", Reina Pacheco may not look intimidating, but in the game of squash, she's a giant. Running opponents like me all over the court.
There we go. Now I'm working you. Now I'm working you.
It's a game she takes seriously because it taught her to dream big.
There were points in my childhood that I just wasn't sure. And when you're undocumented, nothing is secure, right? Everything is a question mark.
At times homeless and constantly in fear of being deported, this type of racket sport was nowhere on Reina's radar until a squash program came to her school in San Diego.
We take low-income students from areas that are often never seen squash before, so they spend half of the time studying and half of the time training squash.
It's not like you can go to a soccer field and play anytime. I had to take a bus ride at 4 a.m. in the morning to get to the squash courts by 7 a.m. and I would go to school and do it all over again at night.
The work ethic she developed paid off.
I started to slowly beat everyone on the team, and that became pretty easy. And then I started to slowly realize that I needed to get outside of California.
Reina would go on to earn a scholarship and play at Columbia University, later joining the Pro Tour. She's now an investment banker on Wall Street. Her life story so compelling, it was portrayed on Apple TV's miniseries Little America.
This is life. We don't always get another shot. Okay, when you go back in there, a little bit more positive, a little bit more focused, a little bit more sharp.
Her first coach gets emotional when he looks back.
It's powerful.
Proof, he says, this program works.
It's more than a sport.
Yeah, it's life, you know. You see students that really comes from a goal to do better in life.
Currently, there are more than 2,000 kids enrolled in Squash and Education Alliance programs across the U.S. Organizers say 94% of their kids graduate and go to college.
She is proof that squash can change kids' lives.
100%.
You think other kids can be like her?
100%. Not only in San Diego, but in Harlem, Bronx, North Philly, all those urban squash programs all over the country and the world now are producing Reinas everywhere.
So I think that when you step on a squash court and in a different country, in a different court with a different language, and you do it consistently, you become really good at adapting and you become really good at being brave all the time.
Learning to first navigate the court to later lead in life.
And Reina is a true inspiration. The Squash and Education Alliance doing incredible things. We thank them both for sharing their stories. And thank you for watching Top Story. I'm Tom Llamas in New York. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.